Hello everyone, it's Tracy. Welcome back to my channel. Thanks very much for joining me. Today I'm doing the assembly tutorial for the eyeshadow palette. This project has been designed by Nicole Silhouette here on YouTube, and I shall link her YouTube channel in the description box below. The eyeshadow palette is available as a cutting die set from the KSCraft Lovers Store, and it's also available as a digital cutting file in Nicole's Etsy store, and I shall link both of those in the description box below. For today's tutorial I'm using the actual die cutting set from KSCraft Lovers Store, so let's get started. Here is my practice one that I made first to make sure I was happy with how things went together. You can see this has a nice profile from each side, and I've made mine a nice shiny black with some gloss black cardstock, and I'm using silver mirror board. It makes the eyeshadow palette look very realistic. So in my tutorial today I'm going to show you how I made my eyeshadow palette into a shaker. It's up to you whether you'd like to make a shaker or not. I love that it has the little eyeshadow applicators, which also adds to the realism. And they sit nicely in those recessed areas. So this is what we're aiming for in our tutorial today. We'll be making another one identical to this one. So here are the die pieces. There aren't very many pieces for the eyeshadow palette. So we have this main piece, and you're going to cut two of those. And I have them here in just normal black cardstock. And you can see that I have folded along the score lines and put double-sided tape on the inside edge. For this other piece we will trim that. I'll show you that later. So that's the first piece. Then we have this piece here, and we're going to cut this piece a numerous amount of times. I've cut mine 5, but it's up to you on how deep you want your shaker. Because I'm also going to use this piece, which does not have a cutting edge. It has a stitched edge, so you can make your piece whatever size you need, and I pre-cut my pieces. And the size I pre-cut them to is, I made 5 of them, and I've cut them to 3 1/4 by 5 inch, and I've cut 5 of those. And that's the measurements in centimetres if you need them. So that just makes it easier to line that piece up there that does not have a cutting edge, to be able to cut those out in the size that you want that will fit in the eyeshadow palette. So I've got my 5 pieces here that I've already gone ahead and die cut out. So mine is 5 layers high, and I've also cut it from black gloss cardstock because this will be my decorative layer that will go over the top. This is the gloss black that I'm using. I get it from Crafts for You. It's A4 mirror card in the black. So this will be the decorative panel that sits on the top, so that the top piece is shiny like that. And I also cut a spare piece the same size, the 3 1/4 by 5 inch, and that will go on the bottom for my shaker. But I'll talk more about that later. Next up we need a piece of acetate, and the measurements you need for your acetate are 2 3/8 of an inch by 4 7/8 of an inch. And there's the measurements in centimetres if you need them. With your acetate you just need to be careful that it only covers your eyeshadow holes, not your applicator holes, because you want that to be a little bit recessed for those applicators to sit inside. And that will go in between like so to make your shaker window. And I will show you all this during the tutorial. So the next part of the die set you get is this decorative rectangle, and this makes the little mirror that goes inside your eyeshadow palette. So I've cut mine from silver mirror board. You also get the word makeup, which you can cut from whichever cardstock you like and put it on your eyeshadow palette if you like. Next up we have the applicators. You get 2 of those. And I've die cut mine out of a mixture of the silver mirror board and just normal black cardstock. I've cut a few of each so I can have a play around with what I want. Next up we have this die here, which cuts decorative pieces, and I've cut mine again from silver mirror board, and they're going to go on my gloss black cardstock around the outside edge of the eyeshadow holes like that. So there are 8 of those. I've then brought this die back into play again, and I've cut it another 3 times from silver mirror board, and they're going to be the decorative pieces that I use for my eyeshadow palette. 2 on the inside as I'm showing, and 1 on the outside of the lid. This piece here is a die that I have in my stash, so I've pre-cut it for today's tutorial out of silver mirror board, and this is a lovely little die set. So I'm just getting it here from my stash. This is from Simon Says Stamp, and it's called Calliope Flourish. If I can find the link, I will put it in the description box below. And that's a lovely little die, and thought it would look nice on the top of my eyeshadow palette. I also cut an additional piece, a couple of pieces of black gloss cardstock, and these are going to be the decorative panels for my lid. So the measurements that I have, so I'm just showing you there where I'm going to use them, on the inside and the outside of the lid. So the measurements are 3 inches by 4 3/4, and there's the measurements in centimetres if you need them. So it's the outer decorative panel for the lid and the inner lid decorative panel. They go like so. That fits in nicely with that silver mirror board piece. So that's all the pieces that I'm going to use for my eyeshadow palette. So we'll get started and we'll put it together. So we're going to start with these 2 pieces. You can see where I put the double-sided tape on the lid piece. And then for the base of the palette, I'm going to trim this piece off along the score line where I'm indicating. And that becomes the right size for the base of the eyeshadow palette. So I'm just going to remove the backings off the adhesive, taking care to line this up nicely, and then press it into place. So there we have our eyeshadow lid and base connected. So we'll move on now to the next part of making the eyeshadow palette. And I'm going to bring in these 5 pieces here. Now you can cut this as many times as you like, and this is going to create the height for your shaker. So depending on how high you want your shaker will depend on how many of these you will cut. Now I'm using 5 for mine because I'm using a combination of this frame piece and also the other piece that makes the shaker. I'm doing my shaker a little bit differently because I don't want to use double-sided foam tape. So crafters, please remember that my tutorials are only a guide. You don't have to follow it to a T. So this piece is 5 layers high, and I'm going to glue that into position onto the base of my eyeshadow palette. Paper crafting is a very individual thing, and we can all make adaptations and changes to suit ourselves, and there's no hard and fast rules, crafters, as you know. So I'm just showing you how I'm making my version of my shaker for this eyeshadow palette. Just making sure all of those are getting a good stick. So that's 5 layers high, so that's half of my shaker height that I want. Now I'm bringing in these other pieces. This piece here is the same size as these pieces here, and that's my fake base of my eyeshadow palette. That piece is optional. But what I'm doing now is I'm going to glue all of these 5 pieces together, one on top of each other, and that's going to make the other part of the height of my shaker. My shaker pieces, or the shaker material, is only very small. But if you had chunky pieces of shaker material, then obviously you would make yours a little bit deeper, and you may even eliminate using the height from the frame piece, and you may only use this piece here and use it with double-sided frame tape, however you want to make your shaker. But I'm just showing you how I make mine. So this piece is 5 layers high. Well, it's working on being 5 layers high anyway. Just getting them all glued together, one on top of each other. This to me is just easier than using double-sided frame tape, or even those foam sheets. So that's 5 layers high, and I'm going to glue that onto what I'm calling the fake bottom. I don't need my shaker to be very deep. My shaker material is only very small, but if you had chunky shaker material, you obviously would make yours deeper. So that means more layers if you were making your shaker this way. So I'm just going to stick that into position. So I don't need mine to be very high. There we go. So I'm just showing you that that's 5 layers high, and that's enough for my shaker. It's also a nice recess height for the eyeshadow applicators too. So then I'm going to stick that piece on top of those stacked 5 frame pieces. So that makes my eyeshadow palette 10 layers high with a 5 layer high shaker. 10 layers high is a nice height for the whole eyeshadow palette. Everything sits nicely, the lid closes nicely, but you could experiment and make yours however high that you think looks best for you. Again, my tutorial is just a guide. So I'm just checking to make sure everything is stuck well, no gaps anywhere, and just wiping away the excess glue. It looks like there's a big gap, but once you get your decorative panels in place, it actually is a really nice height. So next I'm going to move on to my decorative piece, and I'm going to put my acetate at the back of it. And to stick acetate down, it is better to use double-sided tape. So I'm just going to put double-sided tape where I need it to be around the outside edge. Taking care not to put acetate over the eyeshadow applicator areas, because then you won't be able to get your eyeshadow applicator out, because there'll be nowhere for it to sit. And the recess that's made from the shaker part, it just houses those applicators really nicely. So I'm just removing the backings here, and I'm going to stick my acetate into position. Taking care to line it up and press it into place. And that's going to be stuck down over the top like so once I've put my shaker material in. So now we're up to the fun part of putting in the shaker material, and that's going to go into, for mine, in the recessed round circle parts there, as I'm indicating. So I've got a mixture of a few different shaker materials. As I said, they're not very big, so my shaker doesn't need to be very deep. So I'm just mixing it up, putting 2 of one type in a couple of them, and then moving down to the next and putting a couple. You could alternate it, have shaker pieces, or you could put circles of coloured cardstock so that it was just coloured cardstock, or you could use very fine glitter. You could use anything that you like. It's always a messy job putting shaker material in. It always seems to want to go everywhere. So I'm trying my hardest to keep that under control. So what I'm putting in here is some little seed beads. I don't generally have a lot of shaker material in my craft stash. I don't make shaker cards very often actually. So this is the first shaker card I've made in a long time. Because you crafters all know that I like the three-dimensional projects. But every now and then it's fun to change things up a little bit. So I'm just evenly, or trying to evenly distribute my shaker material without making too much mess. And taking care not to move my piece around too much, which makes things spill out everywhere. So that's ready for the top to go on, and that will sit in place like so. So again, I'm going to get my double-sided tape to put around the edge. I'm taking care here to make sure the double-sided tape goes right out to the edge, so it will get a good stick, because we don't want any shaker pieces escaping. So I'll just speed the rest of this footage up. I like to leave it in so that you can see the whole process. So just taking those backings off, and then this piece will go into place over the top of the shaker material. Press it down, making sure everything gets a good stick so we don't get any escaping shaker material anywhere. So that's in place, and now I'm going to put my decorative panel over that shaker material area, and that's going to be one of those silver mirror board frames. The glue I'm using is the Line Co pH neutral adhesive, and I got mine from Karen Burniston. It is a brilliant glue actually, and I'm liking the fine tip applicator. So you can see with the addition of that frame just over the top of that, looks really nice and just brings it all together nicely. Just making sure it's a nice stick. Then I'm going to put that decorative panel into place. Just changing to my other applicator, my other glue applicator, so that a bit more glue will come out. And then I'll put that decorative panel in place. And I sized that decorative panel so that it fit nicely like an inlay with that frame. So switching back to the fine tip here. Makes things a lot less messy. And less messy is always good. So I'm just sticking that silver mirror board frame into place, which sits nicely inlay with the decorative panel. Just pressing it into place, making sure that it's getting a good stick. And checking now to make sure my lid closes nicely, which it does. So now I'm going to stick the other decorative panel on the outside of the lid. Applying glue and putting it in position before pressing down. Making it flat and pressing it against my work surface. Then I'm going to put the other decorative frame in place. Applying glue before sticking it down. And while sticking it down, I'm just taking care to make sure I'm lining it up nicely and that frame is nicely inlaying around that decorative panel. Just taking care and then pressing it down. So I'm just sticking that down, taking care, making sure that it's lined up nicely. And what you will find if you're using glue and any type of mirror board, whether it be silver, gold, black gloss, or red, green, whatever colour, that you will have glue ooze out and go on your mirror board. And I find the best thing to clean that up with is a baby wipe. And that's what I'm doing here, just cleaning up where my glue has oozed onto the mirror board. Sometimes you need to be careful with colours of mirror board, that sometimes the baby wipe may remove the colour, so do a test patch first. But usually it's fine. And our eyeshadow palette's coming along nicely. So I'm going to put a magnetic closure on my eyeshadow palette, and I'm going to adhere it with a small glue dot. And I got the glue dots and the magnets from Crafts For You, and that's a company in Australia. So I will link that in the description box below. So I'm just applying the magnet. The magnets are joined together already, and I'm applying a glue dot to each side of the magnet. And then I'm going to put it into position in the eyeshadow palette, in between the applicators. Now you could put this underneath the cardstock so you didn't see it, but it's not offending me in any great way. So it's up to you what you do. So there is our magnetic closure. So I'm going to put this piece into position now on the top of my eyeshadow palette, and I'm going to use my fine tip applicator, which is perfect for this. Sorry, I'm a bit out of frame here. I do come in. I do have a reflector software where I can see what I'm doing to make sure that I'm in frame, but sometimes I forget to even look at it because I get engrossed in what I'm doing. So I'm just applying the glue there to that die cut, and then I'll stick it into position onto the top of the eyeshadow palette. And I even bring in the other one I made so that I can line it up, as you see me doing now. I could measure it if I want to, but you guys know that I pretty much eyeball most things. But you can, if you want, get a ruler and measure it and make sure it's exact. So I'm just pressing that down, making sure that that glue is getting a good stick. And now it's time to put the mirror into position. So that will go in place like so. I'm just going to put glue on the back of it. The fine tip applicators are better suited for smaller areas. I just picked this one up in error, so I should have used my other applicator. So again, I'm just eyeballing it here where I think it's going to look best. Again, you can measure it if you like. So I'm happy with how that's looking and just pressing it down. Next, I'm going to bring in the little decorative pieces that go around the eyeshadow areas. And this really does finish this off nicely. It is optional, you don't have to if you don't want to. But I think this looks really nice, done in the silver mirror board, and it just ties in nicely with the finished eyeshadow palette. So I'm just putting those into position using glue. Next, I'm going to put the eyeshadow applicators together, and I'm gluing 4 on one on top of each other in the black cardstock, just the normal black cardstock, not the gloss. I want mine 4 layers thick. So I'm doing that twice, as there are 2 applicators. And I'm happy with that thickness, and then I'm going to get the ones that I've cut in the silver mirror board and just cut the, I don't know what you call it, that center piece, the stick, I don't know. And that looks really nice also with the foam look black applicator with the nice silver stick handle. I don't know, you know what I mean. So I'm happy with the way that that's looking, and that's our eyeshadow palette just about finished. It is very difficult with the SNS fingernails to pick those little eyeshadow applicators up. as you see me struggling here. But it's because of my fingernails. And I'm happy with the way that that's catching the light and showing you that it's got that gloss realistic look alike. So it's an eyeshadow palette. We call them a compact over here, an eyeshadow compact in Australia. So to finish off my eyeshadow palette, I'm sticking some silver rhinestones in various places on the flowers on the lid and also around on the top of the eyeshadow palette. And it just gives it a nice finishing touch. So that's my tutorial finished for today, the first one for 2023. I hope you've enjoyed watching and that you feel inspired to make one of these eyeshadow palettes. They're not that difficult to make. And you could make it as a shaker or not. It's up to you. It would make a nice little gift for a teenager, a young teenage girl. And you could probably slip a gift card onto the back even, on the underneath side. And that would be a pretty cool way to give a gift card. Don't forget to check the description box down below for the links that I have previously mentioned. And if you'd like to subscribe to my YouTube channel, I would really love that too. Thanks very much for watching today. Have a great day, and until next time, it's bye for now.